The golden stallion giveth, but he never taketh away, because only an asshole does that. Woo! Boy, who said that they do that? Oh, the Lord. Oh, shit. Oh, man. Wow. So I told you that there would be another little episode coming out. And this one, of course, is once again, just as yesterday's Q&A was, recorded from the dungeon. Until we get the second studio set up, that's just kind of how it's going to be. So you're going to have to hear me from the Yeti, the classic blue Yeti microphone, which is just, I know some people talk about the Yeti microphone and say, well, the sound quality isn't that good. And I understand that. It might not be as good as, hooking up to an RE20 or something. But it's so utilitarian and it's so sturdy and solid. Like, you could throw it at anything and it still just keeps on ticking. Not I don't know why you'd throw a microphone, but though I think sometimes when people are listening to Sovryn Tech, they think I'm tossing the microphone across the room or something. I get so heated up sometimes. But hey, it's good to be passionate about things. Anyway, the Yeti's just so solid. I love using it. But let's, what I've got here this today for this, little extra content is a top 8. Now, why a top 8? Is it because of my love of the, base 12 math? No. Is it because I just want to, since top 5s and top 10s are completely arbitrary numbers, that I picked my own arbitrary number just to differentiate myself? Yes, that is exactly why I do top 8s. Though I'm going to admit, I'm going to cheat a little here, because there's going to be what I'm going to talk about here, there's going to be a couple ones that don't exactly fit in with what I want to do a top 8 about, but they're close enough. They kind of sit in a gray area that I'm going to bring them up here. So what happened is that I actually got from a patron, which of course, as always, thank you so much to all the Sovryn Tech patrons. It means the world to me that you donate. Like I said, we get new ones. We get new donors, new patrons every single week. And it is wonderful. And like I said, a lot of people are also upping their donation amount. Thank you. That means the world to me. And I hope you find value in this. If you don't find value in it, please don't hesitate to also let me know that, because then I can know what you're looking for. And, that helps out the show. It helps out me. And in the end, maybe if it's something I can achieve, it'll help out you. So it means the world to me for that. I do want to say that if you didn't hear it yesterday, again, I am looking into ways to get this podcast or, to get this content, the subscriber content, to people to where they can use it. They can listen to it at 2x speed, like you listen to a lot of podcasts. I know I listen to podcasts at about 2x speed myself. Right now, really the only viable way to do that is to, use VLC media player on either a desktop, laptop, or on your mobile device, which they do have it for mobile. And on that, you can alter the playback speed. So you'd have to download it, from the website, from the Patreon website, and then you could play it into VLC on whatever system you've got. That's about the most efficient way of doing it. But I agree. I've emailed Patreon asking them, could you please, in your player on your site, because they're going big on the fact that they have audio. They're going to be releasing their own RSS feed as well in the near future. Would you please make it possible in your player to speed things up, kind of like YouTube does, right? So I haven't heard back from them, but I've gotten in touch with them about that. That would make it very easy, to do it that way. But anyway, we'll see what happens as far as that. So let's talk about it, because I don't want to make this too long, but let's talk about what exactly is this top 8 special about, this top 8, little subscriber Patreon only content. It is about movies, my top 8 movies. Now, there's a caveat, because the patron that asked me about this, great guy, said, but, not science fiction movies, just movies. And, so it's not exactly like my top 8 favorite movies of all time, because I'm taking out all more of the fantasy and science fiction ones. And what's amazing? When I sat down to think about it, this was tough. Usually I can rattle off my top 8 of anything in very short order. This was really, really tough, to think of, because honestly, by and large, my entire top 8 is is full of films, that are, genre films. They're all science fiction or, fantasy or whatever. So to keep it within movies that don't fall into that, boy, that was hard to do. It really was. And even at least one or two of these have like little elements of the fantastique. I'll admit to that. And also some of these are, they're more historical films. So I didn't think those were out of the question, to do historical films. But yeah, this was a tough list to do, to really like sit down and think about. But yeah, I was like, okay, well, this is fun. Let's go ahead. Let's rock this out. Now they're not in any particular order, although number one, I will say, has at various points been my number one movie, because it is just that fucking good. And I will save that for later. Now, I don't put a list because I want to keep it a surprise. I don't put a list in the show notes of the top 8 films because I want you to listen to it. And if you had the list, maybe you wouldn't actually listen to it. Because I like to think I have very good reasons for whatever ones I consider to be the best. To be in here. So anyway, let's start this off with number 8. Like I said, other than number 1, there really isn't, it's not really like in any kind of order. And I am going to toss in outside of this. So there's going to be a couple more outside of the top 8 that I'm going to mention that I wouldn't really put in a science fiction list, but they don't necessarily fit in a more of a real world or historical list either. But I'll mention those, towards the end here. Let's start off with number 8. And, this one, yeah, I'll admit maybe it might be a little bit of a cheat, but I can't picture calling this a fantasy film or calling it a science fiction film or a genre film really in any way. Maybe somebody might want to call this a horror movie. I'm not that into horror films. There's some horror series that I really enjoy. I like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. I really enjoy the Hellraiser movies. There's some series that I enjoy, but I don't really go out of my way to go watch horror films at all. They're not really my bag. But I don't think that this really falls into the horror genre either, even though I guess that's a matter of taste, that's a matter of, personal opinion on whether or not this does. But let's talk about it. It's The Devil's Advocate. This is the 1997 film, of course, starring Keanu Reeves. This is before he did The Matrix, just before he did The Matrix, because The Matrix, came out in 98, 99, all that. And, of course, Al Pacino was in this, and it was one of Charlize Theron's early roles before she really made it big. But just a dynamite movie, directed by Taylor Hackford, who's done other great work. Now, the movie itself is based off of a novel by Andrew Niederman. Andrew Niederman's other novels, honestly, they all kind of follow the same formula as The Devil's Advocate, where it's like this, it's a lawyer, it's a legal novel, it's kind of a John Grisham style novel. And, usually there's some degree of the supernatural, some kind of supernatural thriller aspect to it, which maybe that's the best genre to classify The Devil's Advocate in, is that it is a thriller. And it does have a degree of the supernatural in it. Of course, because Al Pacino is playing none other than Satan himself. All of these movies, boy, if you haven't seen any of them yet, come on. Most of them, it's been 10, 20 years. There's no excuse. Or there's no reason I should hold back on talking about them. This movie, now, also I will mention, I've been excited for this. I don't know at what stage the production is, but I think Spike TV was going to make a miniseries or even a TV series out of The Devil's Advocate. I would totally be on board for that. To make, I wouldn't be on board for a remake of The Devil's Advocate, but I would absolutely be on board with having a longer story. In fact, just bring it. So, okay. Let me get just quick on the plot. The plot is that you have Kevin Lomax, who is played by Keanu Reeves. He is a Florida, not not a prosecutor, but he's a Florida defense lawyer, and he was a prosecutor, never lost a case. Also, as a lawyer, as a defense lawyer, he never lost a case there either. He is, he's really, really good at what he does. And then one day he gets a job offer to go to New York to go, work for some firm in New York City. Milton, Chadwick and Waters, I believe is the name of it. And come to find out, it's all a test, and the whole point for him to do this is for him to, bring on the Antichrist. His dad is Satan himself, who's the head of the firm there, John Milton. Of course, the name John Milton is a reference to Paradise Lost by John Milton, which is all about Satan and, better to reign in hell than to than to serve in heaven, right? And Charlize Theron is kind of his half sister, and they're supposed to have sex and give birth to the Antichrist. That the whole thing's a setup for that. And Charlize Theron, who plays Kevin Lomax's wife, a lot of the plot is around her getting messed up by these various demonic forces and all of this. So that's the plot. Anyway, when the DVD came out, this is one of the first DVDs I ever got my hands on. There was, just saying how much I wanted extra story, and this kind of pissed me off. There were deleted scenes on the DVD. But there was director's commentary by Taylor Hackford over the deleted scenes on the film. And you couldn't get rid of the content, because I was going to hook it up to my iMac. At the time I had an iMac. I was going to hook it up to my iMac, and I was going to, I was going to edit the film. And I was going to put all these, put these extended scenes in the right place, and I was going to, have it go up and go out there. Not on torrents or whatever, but just have it available, to share to other people, maybe burn them DVDs or whatever. I actually, at the time, I was big on turning things into DivX. So I could put it onto a CD, I had the 700 megabyte limit, and I could share it with people or whatever. But I thought that would have been really cool. But that's how much I love this movie. You have to understand, there are some movies, I had this theory, and I think I talked about this on Sex and Science Hour at one point, that if I fell asleep, and please, I was a teenager, okay, bear with me. If I fell asleep to a film, that maybe I could integrate a lot of what the film was saying. And so when I first saw this movie, I was really on my way of coming out of being a Christian as a teenager. Of course, I was originally raised Jewish, and then my parents converted to Christianity. And then when I got about 16, 17 or so, I started saying, fuck this, I'm an atheist, none of this shit makes sense. And that was I think that's one of the things that really spoke to me with the film The Devil's Advocate, was a lot of these speeches. Al Pacino, as Satan, as John Milton / Satan, gives a lot of these really epic, sweeping, screeds in the film to whatever character needs them. And they're so right on, granted, yeah, it's rah-rah Satan, but a lot of it just makes so much logical sense. And I myself, I never heard this stuff. I never heard anything like it. It was so powerful. I'm half tempted to cut into this episode and play some of these great speeches that he gives, because they're so good.
Who are you? Who am I? Who are you? Never lost a case. Why? Why do you think? Because you're so fucking good. Yeah? But why? Because you're my father. I'm a little more than that, Kevin. Awfully hot in that courtroom, wasn't it? What's the game plan, Kevin? Was a nice run, Kev. Had to close out someday. Nobody wins them all. What are you? Oh, I have so many names. See. Call me Dad. Who are you carrying all those bricks for, anyway? God? Is that it? God? Well, I tell you, let me give you a little inside information about God. God likes to watch. He's a prankster. Think about it. He gives man instincts. He gives you this extraordinary gift, and then what does he do? I swear, for his own amusement, his own private cosmic gag reel, he sets the rules in opposition. It's the goof of all time. Look, but don't touch. Touch, but don't taste. Taste, don't swallow. And while you're jumping from one foot to the next, what is he doing? He's laughing his sick fucking ass off. He's a tight ass. He's a sadist. He's an absentee landlord. Worship that? Never.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is that it?
Why not? I'm here on the ground with my nose in it since the whole thing began. I've nurtured every sensation man has been inspired to have. I cared about what he wanted, and I never judged him. Why? Because I never rejected him, in spite of all his imperfections. I'm a fan of man. I'm a humanist. Maybe the last humanist. Who, in their right mind, Kevin, could possibly deny the 20th century was entirely mine? All of it, Kevin! All of it. Mine. I'm peaking, Kevin. It's my time now. It's our time.
You know, look, but don't touch. Touch, but don't taste. Taste, but don't swallow. And while you're jumping from one foot to the next, what's God doing? He's up there laughing his sick fucking ass off. He's a tight ass. He's a sadist. Worship that? Never. I mean, see, like I can quote the shit. I can quote that whole movie verbatim. I was just quoting it. You know, the whole thing, you know, he's an absentee landlord. I mean, oh God, Satan. There's so many great quotes and lines in the movie. I remember going to work. At the time I was working at Wendy's to piss my parents off because they didn't want me working. But I remember going, you know, like I would set the, you know, whatever a sink or the washing machine, you know, whatever the sink to, you know, to like as hot as it could be. That way the water was bubbling and smoking. And I would reenact the scene where John Milton, you know, Al Pacino / Satan goes into the Catholic Church and he touches the holy water and makes it boil. And I just like, you know, he does this little look and he looks up at Christ and everything. And I would pull that shit all the time at work. Like, this movie was quintessential to my path in so many ways. Oh man, what a film. There is no need to, like I say, there's no need to remake this movie. The acting's great. And I think Keanu Reeves did a great job. Obviously Al Pacino did. Charlize Theron did phenomenal. Everybody involved did a great job. But I really think that Keanu Reeves did a good job. I totally believed in his, you know, Florida stud attitude. I think it worked. You know, actually another thing too, I mean, yeah, I can't begin to tell you how quintessential this film was to me. And it's not the number one, but it would be close. I lived in Ocala, Florida for a few years after I got out of the military. And I went to, even then, because when I went into the military, I got very confused and I became a Christian again. And believe me, that lasted longer than it should have, but whatever, I got out of it and, you know, I snapped out of it and said, no, Brian, you're an atheist, you know, but that's another story for another time. Anyway, I was still so, like, I still thought this movie was so amazing. I went to, because in it, the character, Kevin Lomax, you know, Keanu Reeves' character is from Gainesville, Florida. And I went to the church, to the Baptist church in Gainesville, because they actually filmed it in Gainesville. I went there and, you know, I walked around the church a bit and everything just to, you know, kind of check it out. I mean, it's only in the movie for, you know, 2 minutes, if that. But I wanted to see it. You know, I wanted to be able to touch really parts of this film. It's so good. I don't blame Andrew Niederman, you know, the author, for trying to repeat success by having other books kind of follow the same line. And you can't exactly do a sequel to it. The book itself is pretty good. I thought his book was great, but it's nowhere near as good. Like, without Al Pacino's delivery as Satan, oh man. Yeah. And the scene, the scene where he, Kevin's mother, you know, Keanu Reeves' character, his mother is visiting from Florida. and they're all coming back from dinner, and everybody lives in this, this kind of partnership building apartment. Everybody has apartments that are all part of, Milton Chadwick Waters. And there's a point where John Milton, where Al Pacino's character, is coming home as well at the same time, and he has two women with him, which what was Connie Nielsen? Was it Connie Nielsen was one of them? And then whoever the woman was that was playing, this Asian woman named Giselle. But Connie Nielsen, who will make a reappearance in this list down the line, so there's a hint for some. But Connie Nielsen, gorgeous. He's getting it, they're getting into the elevator. So again, Kevin's with his wife and his mother. John Milton is with, two women, these two very sexy women. And they're both going up the elevator, and Kevin's go off to, go have, get back into his apartment with his mother and his wife. And John Milton interrupts and say, "Hey, Kevin, the Moyevsky, you want to tell me about, or, what's going on with this case, whatever." Because Craig T. Nelson's in it too, the guy from Coach, does a great job. And that's one of the central cases of the movie. And he says, he's like, you want to come upstairs and tell me about it? And he's, Al Pacino saying it with such panache, because behind him is Giselle and Connie Nielsen's character, pretty much playing with each other and starting to kiss and everything. And Keanu Reeves is like right now. And, he looks behind him. Yeah. And Kevin's like, "No, that's all right. I need to get going." And John Milton says, "You sure?" And he kind of looks back at the elevator, and there, like I said, there's the two women, pretty much making out, taking their clothes off already. Oh man, I just love that. "You sure?" And then of course, Keanu Reeves, Charlize Theron, the character there, the wife gets mad at him and everything. And, oh heavens. That is such a good film. Hedonism all the way. It's beautiful. I love The Devil's Advocate. I could talk about it forever. And I could quote it, forever. Just a fantastic little movie. So, and it doesn't get I don't think it gets enough credit. I don't know that it really won any awards. I know the only thing I remember is a lot of people thought it was nuts. They thought Keanu Reeves did kind of a rough job. I totally disagree with that assessment. And I think at the time, too, in the 90s, you were really going through a phase of Al Pacino movies where he was known for giving these epic speeches, kind of like Scent of a Woman, when he was in Scent of a Woman, which I love. That's another great movie. Not in my top 8, but that is a fantastic little movie there. It's like, never mind. I won't quote it. But this whole place is out of order. What the fuck? Anyway, yeah, Al Pacino's great. So I know that people were getting a little tired of the heavy-handed speeches, perhaps, from Al Pacino in his movies in the 90s. But I think that really Devil's Advocate was him at his best. It was definitely a high note, for the actor. Just fantastic. So anyway, let's get on to another movie. Like I said, I want to try and keep this short. We're at 20 minutes already. So let's get into that might surprise. Because of, I guess, maybe the nature of it. So the movie is Bloodsport from 1988. Just the first one. I kind of have a rule that, there's a lot of movies that have a lot of sequels that I could have counted, or that I generally don't like to count when I say something is my favorite movie or one of the top films, because usually when you have sequels, you have to consider the sequels as part of the overall whole. Star Trek: The Motion Picture is my favorite movie of all time, but I don't say that generally because you sort of have to know Captain Kirk. You have to understand the rest of the canon to understand what happens with it. The Matrix could be said to be my favorite movie, but I think, to really grasp everything that's going on, you need a lot more of the canon. And I love the Matrix trilogy. I think it's wonderful. Revolutions is definitely the weak point, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's still a very good film, and Reloaded was great. And anyway, So the movie for Bloodsport here, we're at number 7 from 1988. This technically has sequels. It has like 4 of them, and I'm not to say that they're like bad movies. In fact, they didn't really have Jean-Claude Van Damme in them. And instead they had the guy, what was the name of was it Step by Step? Was the show Step by Step with Suzanne Summers? It was kind of that Friday night. It was part of the ABC's TGIF. The guy, I think he played Cody. I forget the actor's name, but he kind of played the dumb cousin that lived out of a van in Step by Step. He was actually the main star, and I think he played Frank Dukes' brother. Frank Dukes is the true story that Bloodsport takes around is centered around or based upon. That Jean-Claude Van Damme plays. But anyway, the character Cody, the actor that played Cody, he in this, he ends up taking the center stage in the other films. And the other films aren't based on a true story. Not to say that Bloodsport is like this great representation of the life of Frank Dukes, but it is, it's based on it. And so, I don't really count the other films as far as, bringing this up. But Bloodsport, I think in so many ways, there's so many things done right with this movie. Of course, it is about, again, the character Frank Dukes, who was in the Foreign Legion, and he ends up leaving the Foreign Legion because his Shidoshi is dying. Kind of his master that he learned from as a kid. And he ends up, going to represent his house, his Shidoshi's house, in the Kumite, which is this, kind of like Mortal Kombat before Mortal Kombat was even a thing. In fact, that's part of why I think this movie is so great, is it really inspired so much of the greatness that we had in the 90s on a bunch of different media levels, on a bunch of different venues and genres. This is a lot of things were based on this film, including Mortal Kombat and even, I think, really Street Fighter, and some of these other things were totally based around this. Even, you look at the character of Johnny Cage, obviously based off of Jean-Claude Van Damme, the movie star, that can really kick ass and everything, right? So Bloodsport is, anyway, that's the basic. If you don't know the plot of Bloodsport, that's the basic thing. Jean-Claude Van Damme is, he takes on all these fighters from around the world in this very secretive, combatant match, this very secretive UFC called the Kumite, all of which is largely real. Like that's the amazing thing with this movie, is that there's a lot of movies that talk about this sort of thing, about these, secret fight clubs and all this different stuff. But this is the one that actually where there's some reality based around it. So that makes it very unique in that case as well. But everything about the production of this movie, the writing, some parts of it are kind of cheesy. It's really cool to see Ogre outside of Revenge of the Nerds, which the Revenge of the Nerds movies, that's the actor that played Ogre. The Revenge of the Nerds movies would have absolutely been in this list, but all 4 of them are great. So it's part of a series, so I didn't want to count them. And I think all 4 of them, really add something. So I didn't just want to pick out the one. But Revenge of the Nerds is one of the greatest movies of all time, no question there. But anyway, the character that played Ogre in the Revenge of the Nerds series the actor is in Bloodsport, and he ends up playing Frank Dukes' friend, Jean-Claude Van Damme's character's friend. And then you have the amazing Bolo Young, who is just such a jacked dude. I think he was actually either like a Korean or Japanese bodybuilder, but he was a real bodybuilder. And of course, he did some other movies like TC 2000 with Billy Banks. That's a fantastic little martial arts action thing. All the acting in it, I think, is top notch. In fact, even Jean-Claude Van Damme, he really So it's not my favorite Van Damme movie. There's a movie called Black Eagle from maybe 2 years before, where Van Damme is actually he plays a Russian, he plays a Soviet, and he's the bad guy in the movie. And it's really cool to see him as the bad guy. But he really does, he delivers such I don't think he's a bad actor at all. I love Jean-Claude Van Damme's movies. Pretty much every one I really, really like. But he, this is kind of the prototype of a lot of the characters that he plays after the fact. And there's no reason to mess with success. I think Lionheart is a great movie. It's very much like Bloodsport, but so what? Like if you're going to, so here's the thing for me. If you're going to complain, and this is sort of, I think, a new realization perhaps for some people. If you're going to say that The Force Awakens is a completely legitimate film, Star Wars The Force Awakens, if that is a completely legitimate film, just, considering how much it copied A New Hope, but it's still legitimate, then honestly, I don't care how much Lionheart copied Bloodsport. It's a legitimate film. Kickboxer. I don't care how much Kickboxer copied, Bloodsport. It's a great movie, so it remixed things a bit. I think that's okay. And then, there's The Quest. I mean, there's a lot of, The Quest I love that movie with Roger Moore. That's fantastic. That movie, you could do a whole analysis on that movie alone because it's supposed to be like, a lot of people don't realize a lot of the backstory around the movie The Quest with Roger Moore and Jean-Claude Van Damme, but damned great movie. No pun intended. But anyway, so all of those films I think are awesome. I love Kickboxer. The whole Kickboxer series is pretty good. There ended up being more of those. I think Lionheart is a phenomenal movie. Great movie. Almost better than Bloodsport. Almost. But Bloodsport was really the prototype. For a lot of Van Damme's movies. He's probably my favorite action star, even more so than, Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, and some of these other guys. I think Carl Weathers is an awesome action star as well that does not get enough credit for how much he was delivering, especially as a black man, in the 80s. He was really going toe-to-toe with the biggest actors out there, and even like Action Jackson, he did a great job in that. Unfortunately, Van Damme and Carl Weathers really never got to meet up and get to do their thing. Carl Weathers, of course, now is in that sci-fi show, The Colony, right? I think it's called The Colony. Anyway, I haven't watched that yet, so I don't know. But I really don't need another show in my life as much as I love Carl Weathers. But anyway, Van Damme delivers the goods here. It is a lot of martial. I mean, there have been other martial arts films. There's American Ninja. There's Best of the Best, which is an awesome series. There's all this great stuff. But Bloodsport's like the one. It's like the perfect one. It's the prototype for all of these different films, and it really made them viable. The music in it that Paul Herzog, scored, and also that Stan Bush is well known for doing a lot of the music from the Transformers movie from 1985. He did, The Touch. You got the touch, right? Stan Bush, a lot of people don't know this, and I've talked about it on Sovereign Tech before. In fact, I tried to actually hire him to do the credits music for my video game Hyperchronius, because I really wanted him involved with it. But Stan Bush is such a great artist. If you are not listening to all of his albums, especially In This Life, which came out a few years ago, he's had other ones. He came out The Ultimate last year, or 2014 now, which was one of his best albums that he's ever made. But anyway, his work that he did on Bloodsport was awesome. On My Own Alone, the opening song, Kumite, Fight to Survive, fucking great music. Yes, it's 80s cheese, but what is wrong with that? That's okay. And this is the thing with like 80s and 90s cheese. It was really inspirational. It was aspirational to some degree too, so I think it can be appealing to some in that way. But it was very inspirational. So much of the message of the 80s and 90s was, you got this. And that's the message that so many people need to hear today. You got this. Look, I know things are shitty, but you got this, man. You can do this. Like, I love the cheesiness. I really do. I think it's wonderful. I get so tired of people getting pissed off about that. You can go fucking have your Nirvana. Okay? That, Cobain ruined everything and offed himself in the end, because that's the ultimate message, or in my opinion, I don't like the fact that somebody died, but that is the ultimate end game message of that depressing fucking music and the depressing fucking movies, and all that. Not that movies, can't have a sad ending. There's certainly something to be said for that. But I think cheesiness is great. I think, having that larger than life stuff is really, really cool. Anyway, I'm getting off on a screen. But overall, just Bloodsport is so good. Van Damme really brings his A game. Like when there's the moment where Bolo Young, his character, it tosses some dust in in Frank Dukes' eyes and everything. And just like the way that he's, remembering his, his training and everything, and how he recognizes, like, because he starts going around and he's like yelling, he's like, ah, I mean, like, it's so intense and you really feel it. And Paul Herzog's music, really, it's so minimalist. It's one of the first real minimalist score. I know a lot of people want to talk about Don Davis's like score for The Matrix, where it didn't have a whole lot of melody. Well, Stan Bush delivered the melody for Bloodsport, but Paul Herzog did a great job of bringing in a score that really didn't have, there's a name for it. I can't think of what they call that musical style where there's no actual melody, where there wasn't a lot of points. There was no melody, but you totally get it. Like it brought poignancy to the moment. It's really something. If you can get your hands on the soundtrack for Bloodsport, in fact, I'll tell you what, just for Patreon subscribers, if you want a copy of the Bloodsport soundtrack, you can message me. You can get in touch with me if you can't find it yourself, and I will get you the MP3s. Okay, so there you go. Value for value, baby. I will hook you up because it's a short soundtrack. There's not much left to it. It was just a little record. It had a very rare release, but I'm really kind of proud to have it, and I just think it's so good. So anyway. Bloodsport, just a great movie. There's really some pretty interesting messages in it, and it's good action. I love the way that Frank Dukes is just, saying fuck you to the government in whatever way. I mean, there's a lot of that to it too. Just rebelliousness in general. Obviously, I wasn't an anarchist when I used to watch this movie as a kid. I think some people might be maybe shocked that I enjoy a film of that nature. I mean, look, I've been taking Krav Maga for years, and I've been practicing Krav Maga for years and years and years. I am not against self-defense. I am not against this sort of thing. I am against the use of lethal force, and I can enjoy an action movie as much as anybody else. I mean, I think some people might get shocked by that. There's nothing wrong with it, with enjoying that, with enjoying high drama. That's really what it comes down to, and that's a part of it. Would I love it if there's a world where violence no longer gets used? Absolutely. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about movies, and just having, great art and presentation. So anyway, Bloodsport, fantastic movie. Just one of the best movies out of the 80s overall. And it is, I think it's really the progenitor to all of the martial arts films. I mean, yeah, Bruce Lee was doing it before, I know, and Chuck Norris was doing it before to some degree. And you had, like Shokazugi. I mean, like I love watching a lot of, like classic Japanese ninja films. I think all of those, especially Shokazugi. I mean, man's a god. But this is what really took it over the top. And that's how we ended up with the American Samurais, American Ninja, all these great different movies and these, long drawn out series. And I do recommend, I think the other Bloodsport movies were pretty good too. So, go for it. And I mentioned Black Eagle. I think that's an awesome film. Like, not a lot of talking in that movie. And it's so rare to see Van Damme playing the villain outside of, the latest Expendables movie or something. But it delivers. A great movie if you can get your hands on that. And make sure you get the extended director's cut of that too. Anyway, okay, let's get on to another movie. How am I doing on time? we're taking the time. Next one, Swordfish. This one might not come as much as a shock. This is definitely it's an action thriller, action crime thriller, but it is kind of a hacker movie. Granted, there's no actual hacking that goes on in it, there is, what cinemagenic versions of hacking goes on, but like you don't see anything legit, which is true for largely any time that you see any hacking on the silver screen or even on the little the TV screen. So this is with Hugh Jackman, John Travolta, Halle Berry. In fact, Don Cheadle's in it too. He wasn't as big a deal at the time when he made this. But Dominic Sena directed it, did a great job. Of course, Joel Silver was the producer. Joel Silver would become famous for, he was already famous when he made this because this movie came out in 2001. But Joel Silver was famous for being the producer on the Matrix movies, so he was able to get a lot of projects, through pretty quickly at this time. Because this was also before 2003 when the Matrix sequels came out. So his name was gold, and he was able to get out a lot of different stuff. Vinnie Jones is in this too, who's always just that great guy to just have on board with any little action movie you're having. But I think this is a great movie. It's a very smart film. A lot of people remember it mainly because I think it was the first time that you got to see Halle Berry's tits. And let's just be all honest, folks. They're nice. Woo. And she does a great job in this movie. John Travolta plays the villain. And he, even though... I'll get into that. But anyway, Hugh Jackman is this notorious hacker. He is getting asked, this is kind of the plot for it, he is getting asked by John Travolta's character, who is, you eventually find out is Black Ops. And he is being hired to get access to this, billions and billions of dollars that had been, kind of slush funded around through various American Black Ops organizations. And it's a really unique film. In fact, it kind of looks back on itself, or it kind of looks at itself. Like the movie is kind of meta because it opens up with Travolta saying, the problem with a lot of movies today is that they're shit, pure. He goes down this whole thing and he's talking about how, it's amazing that the resolutions which movies get made, it's like you could practically taste the brain matter. He gets this little screed in the beginning. And he's really setting you up by making a commentary as a villain in a hostage situation in the movie. That's the context of the opening. He's really setting you up to say this movie is not going to be like those. Like he talks about Dog Day Afternoon. He talks about other movies where, look, this is what happens. Like what happens, the example he gives, what if in Dog Day, Sonny just says, give it to me now, or, give me what I want now, or the little blonde girl gets it, and then he just shoots the little blonde girl, doesn't even wait for them to meet his demands. And so the movie is all about this, the premise of the film. I think the gist of the film is that the villain is really going to be bad and he is not going to fall for any of your tropes. The villain is finally going to be much smarter. Any plans you think you have, he's going to be much smarter than the FBI. Of course, Don Cheadle heads them in this, or whoever. He is on top of things. And largely it delivers on that. Here's the problem with the whole thing. Okay, not that Hugh Jackman isn't unbelievable as a hacker. I think all the acting's great. I think the direction's great. The music is really, really well done. Christopher Young and Paul Oakenfold, both deliver a lot of the music. Of course, Paul Oakenfold is very well known, and at the time he was doing all kinds of things, like he did that funny remix for Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, which I enjoyed that. But anyway, yes, I do understand the ending, unlike the rest of the people for Planet of the Apes, but I won't share that with you now. The 2001 Planet of the Apes movie, if you want to know what the ending meant, I know for a fact what it meant. And I might have talked about it in Sovereign Tech before, but you can ask me if you want me to talk about it. Maybe I'll do it on a Q&A episode. Anyway, all the music's great, but what happens here, the problem with the movie is I like the idea of the movie to where, yes, finally the villain is going to win. And it's not like Empire Strikes Back, where in the next movie, Darth Vader loses. In fact, he dies. Spoiler alert. But what you find out is that really John Travolta's character is actually still just kind of American Black Ops, just kind of working rogue, but they are still going after the terrorists. So after a fashion, in conventional sense, not in an anarchist sense, but in a conventional sense, John Travolta's still a good guy. And so that kind of throws it off. And I'm like, well, that sucks. It's just like Payback, which is another movie I love by Mel Gibson, despite things Mel Gibson has said in the past. I gotta admit the guy is an artista, no doubt. But anyway, in Payback, it's sort of the same thing. Yeah, Mel Gibson is the bad guy, but he's really just going after badder guys. And so going after guys that wronged him in ways that everybody agrees is wrong. And so you're kind of rooting for Mel Gibson's character in Payback. And so you sort of get the same thing with John Travolta in this, to where, okay, well, he's going after terrorists, so, this is okay. So I understand why he was doing what he does and blah, blah, blah. So he wasn't really a bad guy. So finding that part out, instead of him just going after the money and just wanting to be wealthy, and hang out with, have hookers and blow and play blackjack and whatever, which he does in the movie, and he's driving an awesome TVR car as well. Instead of it being that, they have to do that. And I'm just like, man, this movie would be so good if they just said, nope, he's being completely selfish. He's a hedonist bastard, and he is doing this all for himself and for Halle Berry and whatever else. No, they got to make it like in some way that somehow he's a good guy, or he's just a bad good guy going after badder guys, and I hate that. That's the problem with like Suicide Squad, right? It's just bad guys going after badder guys, and it's like that's not an appealing movie to me. I know I can personally tell you because I'll give you a little hint here. I can tell you that writing a story to where the bad guy is really the bad guy and doing really bad things, having a villain-centric movie is so hard. It is so hard to do. And to not have, the hero win at the end, you know what I mean? I know a lot of people want to point to, Heath Ledger's Joker. First off, I don't think that that's the best Joker ever. I think Jack Nicholson is the best Joker ever. I like my Joker to be classy, not just ridiculously insane. I like a good hint of class. Of course, Mark Hamill's a great Joker too. I wouldn't take anything away from him, from his work. But you still have Batman winning in the end, and it's like, well, that's not really like the bad guy just being bad. I don't. It doesn't deliver. Now I know this is tough, and here's a hint because one of the original story treatments that I was doing for my video game, actually Hyperchronius, that I mentioned earlier, which you can get now, by the way, if you haven't already. Just go to zog.ninja. But one of my original treatments was that Hyperchronius was going to be, in the conventional sense, the bad guy. Now granted, after, considering how so my characters in Hyperchronius are anarchists. So in a world that loves the state, I say this in the beginning of many Sovryn texts. In a world that loves the state, anarchists are supervillains. Okay, so, Hyperchronius, I was going to write him up as being this very, kind of annoying and crass bad guy. I didn't go that route with it, but that was the idea. And the bad guy was going to win. And that by most people's metrics, this was the bad guy winning. But what's amazing is that is really hard to do. That's not to say I won't do it again in the future. I won't try for it again in the future and I'll figure it out. But it is a tough as shit thing to do, to really have the bad guy win all the way and have the heroes, not win at all. Some could say that the Terminator series is always about the bad guy eventually winning because it keeps coming back. But not really. So anyway, Swordfish was a great attempt at it. But overall, the style of the movie was great. It was very sexy. And it was at the time, a very rare film about a hacker. That was a rare thing at one point. You didn't get that much outside of, say, War Games, or let's move on to our next film, that being Hackers. Now, Hackers holds a really, really special place in my heart for a few reasons. But the first one is that this movie came out in 1995, and it's all about, kind of like it's a style film. It's a thriller, but it's a style film, kind of showing off this is what the young hip hackers of the 90s are like, which a lot of them weren't like that at all. And certainly the hacking being portrayed with all this graphical interface and everything was ridiculous. There's almost no reality in this movie. There's some great stuff that gets mentioned. A lot of different manifestos get mentioned. There is some cool information, but it is a movie all about being cool and about making kind of, really having computers sort of being cool and being sexy. And so you can appreciate it for its style. You don't appreciate it for its portrayal of hackers whatsoever. Though I do think this is a movie that, well, I'll get to why I loved it so much, or, why it holds a special place for me in a second. This is a movie that I think actually crafted a subculture instead of it portraying a subculture. And this happens sometimes with films. Often it can even happen with documentaries, which obviously Hackers is the farthest thing from any kind of documentary. But, you think of the great, one of my favorite documentaries, one that I could quote right and left. In fact, if I was doing top 8 documentaries, it'd probably be at number 1. That being Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was a movie that really crafted, that set the template for, okay, if I want to be like this, I'm going to act like them. I'm going to be like these bodybuilders. I'm going to do what they do. I'm going to listen to what they say, blah, 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 blah. So I think in a lot of ways, Hackers really crafted, sort of the hacker culture, the cypherpunk culture and all that. It definitely made it hip and cool. And I think it inspired so much of what, if you go to Chaos Computer Club, and you go to DEF CON and all these different ones, when you go to these conferences or, conventions and whatever, I think a lot of it was, I think Hackers inspired a lot of that. It wasn't the other way around. So the reason that it was so, that it holds a special place in my heart was because in 1995, I was a 14-year-old stallion. I think this came out in like November of 95. I can't remember that exactly. But I was a very young stallion. And this is the first movie I got to see on my own, where, it was whatever night it was that my mother does her shopping and everything. I got dropped off at the mall. And I was finally able to go and see a movie completely on my own. I had gone to the movies previous. I went, I remember seeing The Mask. I saw Bebe's Kids, The Rocketeer, all great movies, by the way. Bebe's Kids is, that's a long story. But I can remember, I went to theaters to see a bunch of movies, Ghostbusters 2, I can remember all that stuff. But Hackers was the one where I went completely on my own. And I'll tell you, as an avid moviegoer, which, I'm not as avid as I once was, but I mean, I used to I was an avid moviegoer as in I had to go see a movie every single weekend. And if no good movies came out on a weekend, I went and saw the good one that was already out again. And I still have all my tickets. I'm one of those guys. I have quite the history with all those ticket stubs. So some of them I marked with a little dot that meant that while I was seeing the movie that, woo-hoo, good times were being had. Anyway, the tickets have kind of faded, so you can't really see all that. But we're at Hackers, right. So this is the first one I got to see on my own. After that, I was so successful in doing so that my mother was like, oh, well, he can do these things on his own. That's fine. And so then I was able to see a whole bunch of movies on my own. I was even able to take my younger brothers to see, movies. I remember seeing Mortal Kombat in the same year on my own. Seeing Batman and Robin, which I actually enjoy that movie. Thank you very much. And Batman Forever, one of the best Batman movies ever, next to the 66 Batman. Anyway, so Hackers holds a special place for me because of that, because it's really synonymous with my autonomy. And it really solidified, seeing this, being that young and seeing the cool factor of computers, seeing it displayed in a cool way, as unrealistic as that was, definitely inspired me to really get involved and be a part of the cypherpunk movement. I mean, so in a lot of ways, a lot of people, like I said, this movie was inspirational to a lot of hacker culture and to a lot of people that ended up becoming hackers because they're like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is great. And even though at that time in 1995, that's not how things were, that's certainly how things ended up getting made. Down the line. So a lot of people became interested in computers because of this movie. This is a really, really key film. There's never, and what's ironic too, though, is even though, like I said, there was, you have Swordfish, or, there's a big debate, actually. Was that movie called Operation Swordfish, or was it called Swordfish? Because, well, depending on what you saw on the cover of the film or on the movie posters. Regardless, you have Swordfish. There's been recent, blunders like Black Hat, terrible movie, and some others where, yeah, they portrayed hacking, but it's still a very, very rarely touched on culture or subculture and a topic overall. It gets used a lot as a topic. There's a great movie with Harrison Ford called Firewall, which I love that movie. That kind of get into the aspects of hacking, and of course it's in the background, but it's never the centerpiece. It's so rarely the centerpiece of the story. It just doesn't happen often, and shockingly, it still doesn't. So Hackers is very rare in what it brings up. As bullshit as it is, what it delivers, it really does something unique. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the soundtracks, there ended up being and obviously all this music was not in the film, but again, this movie crafted a subculture. There were 3 releases for soundtracks for this movie. All 3 of them are gold. They are just dynamite soundtracks, all electronic, kind of acid house, some of it's acid, techno, all the good shit. It's great music. Just top-notch soundtracks. Maybe the best soundtracks to come out of the 90s next to all of the Mortal Kombat soundtracks. And yes, there are a ton of Mortal Kombat soundtracks. There's not, even though there's only a couple movies, and the second one was, though the TV show Conquest was good, there are a ton of Mortal Kombat soundtracks, and all of them are great. But anyway, the Hacker soundtrack's phenomenal. Cannot recommend those enough. Of course, Angelina Jolie's in it. You get to see a nip of Angelina Jolie. Pardon me for sounding like such a pig, but it was a thing. I mean, and it was rare for her. Like, it was one of her breakout roles. I mean, she had been in Cyborg 2 previous, which was a sequel to the Van Damme movie Cyborg. We got a lot of interweaving here, don't we? And she was great in that. And then of course she goes on to play Tomb Raider, which I enjoy those movies. I mean, this was, Matthew Lillard started off in this. I think this was his first role before he went on to go do the Scream movies. And of course, the phenomenal fucking film, science fiction though, Wing Commander. Love that movie. Fucking love that movie. Talk about a great score too. Holy shit. David Arnold and Kevin Kiner, they hit it home. So Hackers is just this really cool film. Again, total bullshit. There's no reality at the time. There's no reality in it whatsoever. And as far as hacking goes, I mean, you're still not seeing all these crazy like graphic interfaces that get displayed. Again, that's all cinemagenic. That's all to make it look good on camera. You don't get any of that, in real life, but today. But so much of it did. It's such an important film. That's all I can say about it. Let's move on to another one. Let's shift gears. We're in, what are we on? Number 5? I lost track of where we are. I'll tell you when we're at number 1. How about that? But this movie, I mean, total night and day from Hackers and much of everything else that we discussed. Ben-Hur. Now, not the new Ben-Hur movie. I haven't seen that yet. I'm not that excited to see it. I think it's fine that it exists. No problem there. I've heard some good things, some bad things. But the 1959 Ben-Hur. Now, it's important to bring up that this movie is in and of itself a remake. It's actually a remake a couple times over. There had been previous versions of Ben-Hur. And of course, based on the novel from Lew Wallace, 1880, Ben-Hur, a story of the Christ, right? Or a tale of the Christ. I think that's the full title. Well, I've read the novel. The novel is actually pretty interesting, even if you're an atheist. It's a fair read. And even if you're an atheist, it's a fucking movie. This movie, this is in some ways the original epic. I mean, there are other movies before it, Gone with the Wind and some others. I respect that and I appreciate that. And of course you have Metropolis. But like the great historical epic, the one that everybody remembers, the one that I think still holds up and just has such tremendous, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say panache again. I already used that word once. But just has such great gusto and moxie and guile. And I mean, it has there's such greatness to it. Most movies would have a hard time matching up, I think. In fact, there are very few, and there's only one that I can think of, but I won't tell you what that is yet. Oh, well, maybe there's 2. In fact, a movie that might surprise people that isn't on this list is Braveheart. Look, Braveheart's a great movie. I won't take anything away from that. Phenomenal film. Just wonderful. That is one of the movies that may have superseded in epicness the level of Ben-Hur. But not really. I don't think it did, because at the end of the day, as great as Braveheart was, it's stylistically, it's very simple. There's not any like really grand shots. I mean, yeah, there's some shots with grand armies and all that, but there isn't really any of that grandiose places that you get to see in it and all of that. Not cinematography, that's not the word I want to use, but just geographically, it's sort of a boring film. Not that there's anything wrong with Scotland. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there's not a whole lot going for it. Anyway, Ben-Hur. Charlton Heston, in my opinion, the greatest actor of all time. He just, God damn it, did he deliver in this. He was so good. Obviously, it appealed to me. Like I said, I grew up Jewish. And so to see this Jewish prince of a character, being such a hero, you don't get that often in a Christian, especially back then in a Christian culture. Of course, I mean, yeah, I grew up in the 80s, so it was a different time. But I could imagine looking back that it was very, very difficult to find like a Jewish hero, even though eventually, in some ways, this ends up being a Christian film, but very lightly, I think. So, the story of revenge, the epic, naval battles that happened in it, all of it still really holds up really well, and it still looks really good. Of course, the classic chariot scene, which is just unmatched in cinema. I mean, even George Lucas knew that. That's why he, copied it almost shot for shot in Episode 1 with the pod racer sequence. Just phenomenal. You never see, the golden age of Hollywood, as they call it. You never really see, and maybe some people would say this doesn't qualify as that. I think it does. But you never see it on such an epic scale, in my opinion, as you do with Ben-Hur. The sets are huge, and they're all physical. There's no computers. Like ENIAC's out there or something. But, there's everything is really physical. The shots are, you have just tremendous, stuntmen and all this. It's so visceral, so real. And you feel it. And not to get into any kind of conventionalism, but it is a manly fucking film. I mean, Charlton Heston is or Chuck Heston, as I like to call him, is definitely, if you're going to buy into this conventionalism, he is a man's man. He is the real deal. He is totally legit. But then, Jack Hawkins in it, playing Masala, playing his Roman friend that he grew up with and that he ends up, pretty much in a death grudge with. This vow of revenge is incredible. I mean, both of them just, when they are, I'm not, people can be whatever they want. I'm, totally into gender equality, obviously. And being aware of that sort of thing. But I'm just saying, when Chuck Heston, when Judah Ben-Hur and Masala, the Roman, when they're meeting each other as friends years later, and just that clasp of the, I love this in historical films, not when they shake hands, when they shake forearms, because there's just a lot more trust, involved in that. But when they shake forearms and then they hug each other, it's beautiful. I think men hugging is a wonderful thing. And then when they do the classic spear throw, they, just standing there, they just grab whatever spear is hanging on the wall and they do this little spear throwing competition. Oh man, the spirit behind that is just phenomenal. Kind of that spirit of belonging, brotherhood, and all of this. I know it can be seen as very conventional, but I think it's fantastic. I think it's beautiful. So that alone, just I think delivers. So Ben-Hur, just an epic movie. The score is great. Everything you're seeing is great. The realization of it all is wonderful. No other movie. There'll never be another movie like it. And I'll give the people credit today for trying to remake Ben-Hur. I mean, you are trying to remake, to some people, the greatest movie ever made. It's definitely on my top 8. That takes a lot of guts to try and do that. And it may not end up being such a great cash grab for them, but whatever. This movie's awesome. You can still watch it today. There's not a lot of classic films, I think, that hold up action-wise and acting-wise, and look-wise today. But it does. Ben-Hur just absolutely does, from 1959. Just phenomenal. Ben-Hur. There we go. That's another one on the list. Go figure there'd be one little Jewish film on. And that's something else too. Like, there's so little Christianity in the movie version of it, and I think that's fine. But, credit to Jesus. And I have no idea who played the guy who played Jesus in this, but nobody really does, other than it's on the cast sheet. Because you never see his face, and that's really powerful. Like, you never see his face. That makes for something. When here's this guy that, like, even the Roman soldiers, like, he goes to give, Jesus goes to give Ben-Hur some water, and what's going on. And, just a Roman soldier comes over, saying, "What the hell are you doing?" Saying that to Jesus, and Jesus just stands up and, like, looks at him. And he's just looking at him, and the Roman soldier just goes, "Whoa," and just backs off very quietly and walks away. Like that, talk about great direction. Talk about, great cinematography. Damn, that's how you do it. You express so much by not showing anything, or by showing as little as possible. I love that kind of minimalist, filming. That's great. One of the best scenes in movie history. Credit to Jesus. I'll give Jesus 1. All right, Jesus, you got 1. You did a good job in Ben-Hur. Anyway, all right. So let's get on to another movie here. So what do we have so far? We had Bloodsport, Devil's Advocate, Swordfish, Ben-Hur, Hackers. All right, let's do another classic movie. in my top 8 here. And then how are we doing on time? Oh, fuck, we're over an hour. All right, we'll wrap this up quick. This is one I think that will surprise. This is one that's just going to come out of total left field. Because this is actually a musical, effectively. And it's from 1954, so it's the oldest movie on the list. Beats out Ben-Hur even. And it's Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. This movie, this is a very rebellious film, okay? I'm not one for marriage, whatever. I mean, and it deals with, the movie takes place in Oregon, I think in the 1850s, okay? And it has to do with kind of mountain men and all this, in these kind of frontier towns and everything. So that's kind of attractive in and of itself, right? Like that's enjoyable. I mean, the effects, the sets, you can tell when there's matte paintings and all that. And that's fine. It doesn't take anything away from it. So Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, like I said, it's about this whole mountain man thing. And what's amazing that comes out of it, there's all these various songs. I think Stanley Donen wrote it, and this was Saul Chaplin and Gene DePaul, who ended up becoming a very big deal in the musical scene after the fact. But what's amazing about this movie is that it did not receive a lot of critical acclaim. It was not that popular, or it wasn't like people weren't saying, "Wow, box office success is going to be huge. What a wonderful movie! Oh, the music is fantastic in it," because it's a musical. That's the centerpiece of it. But it ended up being that movie that people it was, in a lot of ways, I think it was the first film that I know of that became popular from the populace and from word of mouth. That the Hollywood, the establishment didn't say it was a great movie. The critics didn't say it was a great movie. It had kind of a smaller release, but people just loved that movie so goddamn much that, it ended up becoming a massive hit. And it's still taught in film classes today. It was taught in one that it was taught in one that my sister took. And so I would write her reports because, I'm a fair writer. And when I was a kid, and she'd pay me, it was great. So I had to watch the movie, and I watched it. I was like, this is awesome. What a fun little film this is, I mean, even as a young teenager, I thought it was really great. And I could appreciate these kind of movies back then, sort of the musicals, like The Happiest Millionaire. I think that's a fantastic little Disney musical with Fred McMurray, not Freddie Mercury, Fred McMurray, the late Fred McMurray. Something that's not necessarily a musical, but Swiss Family Robinson, the live action movie. I love that. So I could appreciate older films as a kid. And Seven Brides for Seven Brothers was just so damn good. The music is really catchy. I can see why it was a word of mouth film, because you would just go around whistling these songs. They're so good. And sort of, the overall, I mean, it's kind of you could say it's kind of a sexist film, because it's about these, 7 brothers, these mountain men brothers. One of them gets married, and then they want to find, wives. The rest of them want a wife. And so they go into a town and they actually end up kidnapping them. And there's this classic song about the Sabine women from Plutarch's histories. But he calls them the Sabine women. They do this whole thing. Those women was sobbing, fit to be tied. Every muscle was throbbing. It's just this classic little song. And it's very funny. I mean, yes, it's sexist. I know. Okay. But it's just a fun film. And kind of the whole mountain man thing, I've always had kind of a strange attraction to the life of the mountain man, kind of the individualist. I mean, there's definitely a real individualist fervor, to that. And it probably didn't hurt that when I saw it, I was recently moving away. I mean, growing up, I moved back and forth from New York City to upstate New York, which upstate New York is all farmland, minus, the few cities like Buffalo, Syracuse, Utica, and, Rochester, Albany, and all that. Minus those, it's all farmland. So I think there was an appeal to that to me as well, that this was mountain men living out in the country and all this shit. I think it's a fantastic little film. It's, in my opinion, the greatest musical ever made. And there's some damn good musicals out there. But this one takes the cake. And it's just fun. And it's so over the top and ridiculous. And there's these great, they got these, this is the other thing with the movie too. The actors they got to be in it were so talented. And there's no stuntmen. These were, some of the shit that you see them do, in various competitions in this little frontier town, that when the story takes place in that. These guys, they don't just act. They sing, they are acrobats, They are stuntmen. Like, these guys can do everything in this movie. These seven, it's amazing to see that. And that's something that we get impressed by today because it's so rare. But back in the golden age of Hollywood, as they call it, you really had to have it all. Like even female actresses, they had to be able to sing. They had to be able to, they had to be able to act. They had to do all this different stuff, and you had to be your own stunt man. I mean, you really had to deliver the goods. We're talking about the classic days of Errol Flynn, which none of his movies made this list, but they could have. Captain Blood, phenomenal. The original, Robin Hood, fucking phenomenal movie. Watch that countless times. Errol Flynn, talk about, we're talking about men's men. Like Chuck Heston. Errol Flynn was the legit deal. What a badass he was. Man. So anyway, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, you really get to see like what it's like, to see Renaissance men in action in a very real sense. Of course, in 1850s Oregon. but just a fun movie. I couldn't recommend it enough. All right, let's move on from that. We got two more. All right, we're going to do two more. Here's a movie that... This won't be number one. This will be number two. And actually, I wouldn't mind if it were, if overall it was was my number two ranked movie. I've watched this movie over and over again. This is another one of those films that I definitely fell asleep to at night, kind of like I mentioned with The Devil's Advocate. And it's from the same time frame, 1995. And it's First Night is the name of it. And this has to do with Arthurian legends, King Arthur. And of course, King Arthur in this is played by none other than Sean Connery, delivering probably his best performance since Highlander, which the Highlander movies, fucking great. And First Night, and also, of course, it has, Richard Gere is in it playing Lancelot, does a phenomenal job. And Julie Ormond is in it playing Guinevere. Man. Stylistically, so the great things about this movie, the score is good for one. Actually, the score is phenomenal, done by the late great Jerry Goldsmith, who is just right up there with John Williams. I mean, as far as the greatest musicians, scores, film scores of all time. I mean, he composers. He's fantastic. Anyway, so the music's great. The look of the movie, it's not a big budget film. You do not get gigantic, battle scenes. I mean, you get some, and they do very well with what they have. There's a beautiful shot. Camelot looks amazing, but this is where it really wins out in a lot of ways, and I have more to say on it too. But the style of the film, the way that they portray the Camelot and the Arthurian legend overall, I just thought looked so cool. Like, they have these great, kind of blue tunics with this really awesome, like this side. I mean, it's impractical after a fashion, but like they have like these little shields on their shoulders, like these silver shields, and just, you don't get into the round table so much. There is a round table. You don't get into the Excalibur legend whatsoever. I do enjoy the movie Excalibur as well, by the way, the classic from 1981, just awesome. But this movie was, it's more or less, it's a romance film set in medieval times. There's nothing magical in it whatsoever. Merlin is not in the movie. But it was definitely what inspired me to really get into, like the entire story of King Arthur. I am a dilettante in Arthurian research. I take it very seriously. I dig deep. So that's something I don't know if I've ever really talked about on Sovereign Tech before, but it is definitely a hobby of mine. Really, really digging deep into Arthurian legend and what's the reality around that. And I think there is a lot of reality around it, but that's another subject for another time. You can ask me to talk about it. Maybe I'd talk about it in a Q&A. But I mean, damn, like this. So, there's a lot of what people think of when they think of King Arthur that isn't in this, but just the style that they deliver and the action and Richard Gere does a great job, being Lancelot, and just kind of, the love story and the betrayal and like even the sword fighting. Like there's actually a lot of philosophy in this movie in First Night. There's some great quotes to grab from it too, including by King Arthur himself. Something like one of my favorite quotes in it is, "Whoever said that beyond Camelot lives lesser men?" Like this idea that just because somebody doesn't live within a certain country, that they are somehow replete of rights, like they don't have, or that they don't have rights, or that they don't have human liberties and all that stuff. I mean, there's great shit like that. And the action sequences, as small scale as they are, they do a good job of working with what they have and making them seem much larger. But they're very intense. They're very personal, and I think they work. The battle sequences, and it's a very sexy movie. And there's a point where Guinevere and Lancelot, Julie Armand, who she looks amazing in this movie. Oh, and of course Richard Gere's Lancelot. They're out in the woods and everything, and it's very sexy what they pull off. Like they're kind of like they're drinking. They're having what do they call those water tacos, where you use a plant to drink the rainwater and everything, right? They don't call it that in the movie, obviously. That's a survival term for them. And that's really hot. There's just, it has such a great look to the movie. I love it. I think it's a very sexy film, great romance film, and I don't mind romance movies. Like even romantic comedies, as they call them. Like I love the movie Love Actually. I think Love Actually is a great fucking romance. It's supposed to be the ultimate romantic comedy, right? Well, I think it kind of delivered. I thought it was great. So I'm totally on board with romance films and even romance books. I've read them here and there. I can get down with that. Hell, I used to watch soap operas when I was a teenager and a kid, and I know I'm not the only one. I've had, in fact, I've even called myself on Sovereign Tech in the past. I called myself the Stefano DeMiro of Liberty, a great listener, a guy I just love. He actually caught it. He's like, "Oh, I know what you're talking about. This is Days of Our Lives shit, right?" Anyway, yeah. So I can appreciate all that. But anyway, first night, really good. The acting is tremendous. The action comes off very legit. The love story is just high drama. And they do a great job for such. The film is far better than I think it was ever meant to be, than it was ever planned to be. And Jerry Goldsmith's score is the roof. I mean, one of his best, and that's saying something. That's hard, for Jerry Goldsmith to ever top himself. That's a challenge. So anyway, all right, first night. There we go. Let's do the last number one. We saved the absolute best for last. Let's get into it. This is another historical film, Gladiator. That Gladiator, Ridley Scott's Gladiator. Ridley Scott, of course, being one of my, this film's from 2000. Ridley Scott being one of my favorite actors, definitely in my top three, right up there with Russ Meyer and, Paul W.S. Anderson, of course, of the Resident Evil movies. Ridley Scott is right underneath, right firmly in that number 3 spot, though Russ Meyer is firmly in number 1. So Gladiator, which, speaking of Russ Meyer, any of his movies could have been in here. Faster Pussycat, all of those could have been in my top 8. I love the guy, but anyway, Gladiator, that came out in 2000. Now, like I said with Ben-Hur, when I was talking about Ben-Hur, how there really hasn't been a movie that has matched, in my opinion, its scale and its, in level of grandiose. And also, the acting and the music and everything just coming to this level of perfection. Gladiator is the one that bests it. Gladiator is the one that really brought back the epic film, I think. Because after Gladiator came out, then everybody started coming out with, Oliver Stone did Alexander the Great. You had Kingdom of Heaven, which Kingdom of Heaven is a fine movie as long as you watch the director's cut. It's actually really good. A lot of these movies, Gladiator, reinvigorated sword and sandal. In a very real sense. Gladiator and 300, which 300 also could have made this list, but it didn't. I love the movie 300. Despite the fact that it's historical nonsense. Like really, because the Persians were not necessarily the enemies. Not to say that I want to buy into that paradigm. But anyway, Gladiator, here is the Roman epic back again, and Ridley Scott just delivered in spades. Gladiator is the reason that I bought a DVD player. Because for a little while, this would have been, around 1999, 2000, 2001, in that time frame. VHS was still a very big deal. And Gladiator came out on DVD months before it came out on VHS. And I mean months. Like there was a 6-month spread between when that came out on DVD and when, and when it came out on VHS. So I was like, well, fuck this. I'm not going to wait. And actually, my girlfriend at the time, one of my girlfriends at the time I was dating 2 women, But this was her favorite movie, and I shared that experience with her. Like, I thought it was a great goddamn movie. Like, at the end, it says, who will help me carry him? You have the character of, Maximus Decimus Meridius, played by Russell Crowe, which this really put Russell Crowe on the map. Because before, what was Russell Crowe doing before? He did Virtuosity, for what was that, 95? A great movie with Denzel Washington, but nobody was billing it as a Russell Crowe movie. They were billing it as a Denzel Washington movie, with Virtuosity. Great movie. But so I knew him from that, and I thought he was fantastic in Virtuosity. So to see Gladiator, I was already going to go see it just to see more Russell Crowe because it was a rare thing at the time. But damn, did he deliver. That was so good. Everything about it, the guy that portrayed Marcus Aurelius was great. Joaquin Phoenix. Was it Joaquin Phoenix? No, wait. Who the hell? Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah, playing the son of Marcus Aurelius, playing Commodus. Was great. And like I mentioned earlier, I said we would revisit Connie Nielsen in this list, who was in The Devil's Advocate, playing the Devil's Daughter. Connie Nielsen was in this, playing the Emperor's daughter, and she did so well. What I know it's cliche, but what poise and grace that she delivered in this movie. Like I said, this put Russell Crowe on the map. And Gladiator, there's so much in it that, the action's intense, the reasons for everything, the story is perfect. And it's based somewhat around real history, around Commodus and what happened with Marcus Aurelius. You get some of that, and just the presentation was huge. Hans Zimmer, his score, along with working with Lisa Gerrard, which would be a partnership that they would revisit over and over again, which Lisa Gerrard's discography, she does the whole, all that is actually really great if you ever get your hands on that. But yeah, Hans Zimmer's score, when you listen to the battle, I remember I would hop in at the time I bought an ACR edition 98 Dodge Neon. I've talked about it before on Sovryn Tech. I would put in, because I put in, really high-end sound system in that. I had my JBL 12s, the whole thing. I would play the soundtrack for Gladiator. There was a specific track called The Battle. And you'd go in 7 minutes. It was like a 10-minute track, and you'd go in 7 minutes, and then they'd have that dun, 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 dun. I would drive down the street listening to that because it was so fucking good. That was so like intense. And you just felt it. You got the goosebumps going when you'd hear that soundtrack. Oh man, So all of that's great. The idea of sort of the message of it, of getting away from imperialism, you could say that that's a good thing too. But just this guy, kind of going after revenge, and just Russell Crowe's delivery and getting through it. And some of the quotes from the film. Whew, what a movie. And that's a movie that is still inspiring. That might be kind of like the last great of the 90s, and it really ushered in all of entertainment that we have today. I think it inspired UFC. It inspired reality. I think it inspired UFC. It inspired. There would be no 300 if there wasn't a Gladiator. I guarantee you that. Even though 300 was based off of a Frank Miller comic book, you wouldn't have. We sure as hell wouldn't have had Spartacus. Blood and Sand, which is one of the best shows in history. And if we didn't have Spartacus, I don't know what the fuck I'd do. So, damn, Gladiator has really changed, and it put Ridley Scott certainly back on the map. Not that he needed it. I think he still makes great movies. Yes, I enjoyed Prometheus. I liked Exodus, Gods and Kings. Gladiator just had it all going for it. The style was fantastic. It really, I think more so than any other film ever, fully realized what you could picture Rome being like. He took some creative license with some things, and he talks about that. When you listen to the director's commentary on the DVD, which I listened to that over and over again, because again, at the time, DVDs were a new thing when this came out, and all of these different features were really something. To listen to a director's commentary was just far out, but he talk about how they lit the flaming arrows at the beginning. The Romans, they never did that. They never dug pits with oil to dip everything in. And Ridley Scott, famously said to the guy, and he says it in the commentary, he says, well, how do you know? Were you there? So he did it anyway, and good for him, because it's such a great movie. And Ridley Scott, I think, really, even though I think everything he does is generally, or most of what he does is really good. I think he needed that great film again, after Alien and Blade Runner, to show people, no, I'm still, I still got it going on. I'm still the man. And Gladiator delivered. It is a perfect film, I think. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that film. And this is the other thing too, the DVD, there's something to be said for this, the importance of this movie, because put it into the context of its time. The DVD in 2000, when that came out, because that movie came out in May of 2000, I believe. When that came out later that year, they went all out as far as presentation on what you could do with the DVD. And this is something that is just so lacking. It is so lacking today. To where, like on a Blu-ray or, on the home video release, that there isn't a whole lot of style put into it. There is so much style when you get the original, signature director's edition DVD of Gladiator. There was even an Easter egg where there was a point in the menus where there would be a picture, because they would play some of, Hans Zimmer's and Lisa Gerrard's music during it, which was great. But there was a point where there was a picture through some of the menus, and there was a lot of extra features on this. Deleted scenes, the whole thing, where there was lions eating the Christians and all that. Where it was a picture of Marcus Aurelius, and you could move, on your DVD remote, you could press up on the remote, and it would go to like the breastplate on Marcus Aurelius, and you could hit enter, and then suddenly, it showed a Gladiator-inspired trailer for the movie Chicken Run, the classic, claymation movie. Another enjoyable little film. But that was unheard of at the time. For there to be Easter eggs, for you to have to find things like that made movies great. Some movies that made great in and of themselves, because then suddenly when you got the DVD of the film, yes, you wanted to buy the DVD because you wanted to find, these Easter eggs. Probably the greatest DVD release of all time was the multi-disc Terminator 2 is the Ultimate Edition. And in that, there was so much shit in that. That's a DVD worth holding on to for all time. But in that, there was you could, on the exoskeleton, okay, of one of the T-800s, in the menu, you could choose, I think you went off to the side to one of the ears or something, and then this little menu would come over, and you could enter a date. And you're like, what the fuck is this? But if you entered with your remote on the DVD, if you entered the date for Judgment Day, August, and all that, then you would get a third edition of the film with deleted scenes put in and a new ending and all that. That was amazing. That made home video so fucking viable. And every time I hear the MPAA or whoever bitch and moan about, that they're losing money because of piracy and all that stuff, believe me, nobody was pirating at that time those DVDs. They wanted those DVDs. You just got to put in the effort to make these things great, and people will buy them. Because, also, just the presentation of the box art itself looked phenomenal. That's what you got to do. People will spend the money. Just make it that fucking good. Make every home video a Criterion Collection release, kind of like they did recently with Fantastic Planet, an awesome movie, animated movie, French from, you can watch it in English, from way back. Release stuff like that, and people will pay. Or at least they'll respect it, and they'll do the word of mouth to where the people that will pay will hear about it. Yeah, Gladiator, phenomenal. Every inch of that movie is great. From how it's been released, from even outside of the theater, out of its theatrical run, it's just been great. So the number one movie, just very inspiring, very very tough, very full realization. CGI was used very judiciously. It was used well in the movie to show off, ancient Rome, and you just finally got to see all that fully realized. You saw history in a very very visceral sense. So I put it at my number one spot on this list. If I could include science fiction movies, it's not number one, but as far as this list goes, it's number one. Now I'm going to make mention, I want to do a couple of honorable mentions. Actually, I want to mention a couple of things. Well, one honorable mention I want to make is the Andromeda Strain from the 70s. Robert Wise, who of course went on to direct Star Trek Motion Picture, which is my, at the end of the day, my absolute favorite movie. The Andromeda Strain from 1971. Awesome little movie, all about like this town and potentially, this virus getting spread, and how do you go through like solving this and keeping this virus from, getting anywhere else. And I don't want to give anything away. If you've never seen the Andromeda Strain, you got to watch the original one. It is a well thought out. It is you might consider it boring, but I don't think so. It's so shot by shot, it's so methodical. I love it. I love how methodical the film is, and then there's points where when intense things start happening, because the movie has been kind of paced and methodical, things get intense. So great movie with the Andromeda Strain. I definitely wanted to mention that. But some people they sort of chalk that up as a science fiction film. So I didn't really want to include it here in that. But I don't think it's science fiction. I think largely it's totally legit and just an amazing presentation overall. The other one I want to mention would be the only recent one, and I have a comment to make on this overall. Limitless from, what was this, from 2009? Limitless is a movie, of course, it starred Bradley Cooper, and it's kind of, now not Limitless, the TV series, that's a joke. There's no reason that should ever been made. It's pure crap. I'm glad at least that it was kind of a sequel and Bradley Cooper still sort of appeared in it. At least they weren't rehashing in this case, because you didn't need to expand on the story at all, in my opinion. And also, so Limitless, it's a Neil Burger film, which any of Neil Burger's films could have made, The Illusionist, all that. They could have made my list easy as well. If I went into top 20 Neil Burger's movies would have started showing up, even more so. But, Robert De Niro, Bradley Cooper, all that. And it's based on, there's a book called The Dark Fields by Alan Glynn. It's based on that. It actually, I think this was 2011. It wasn't 2009. This was made in 2011. But it's about this drug called NZT, and it's about this guy played by Bradley Cooper who ends up getting access to this drug. And this drug, like, it's based on kind of the false science, sort of like Lucy promoted, which is, where you only use 10% of your brain. NZT lets you use the other 100%. I have watched this movie over and over again. It is so well done. It is so good. And it's about him dealing with taking NZT and running out and taking it and blah, 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 all that. But it's not necessarily like a drug addict film of any kind, because that's just not really my bag. So this is about, this guy, becomes super smart, starts getting into stocks and all this different thing. And, it's really great. And that's with the TV series, I'll tell you, that's what ticked me off about the TV series. Somebody takes NZT, they're using 100% of their brain, they can figure all this shit out, and yet they're going to work with the FBI, because that was the point of the TV series, is that this guy that takes NZT ends up working for the FBI. I mean, it's ridiculous. It really kind of sullied I think the movie, even though the movie's ridiculous in that at the end, Bradley Cooper, goes and runs for office. But yeah, great music. Paul Leonard Morgan does a good job. They also bring in some Ash Williams, some of his style to some of the more traditional songs in it as compared to the score. It's the only modern film that I thought was, film in the past maybe 15 years that I would put into any kind of top 10. And I think there's something to this. Now Neil Burger's examples, I mean, he's kind of a unique character, I'll say, as far as, his movies kind of stand above. They're unique in their stance. And I want to mention something to you, because you may be wondering why a lot of more modern films haven't made this list. I think we've largely lost something, and I don't think, some people will say, well, everything you learn to love as a teenager or as a kid, that's what sticks with you for all time, and everything after you're a teenager sucks. I don't buy that. I really don't buy that. In fact, I want to read you a quote. I'm not going to tell you where this quote comes from, but I'm going to read you this quote because I think it's pertinent, appertinent. I like using that word better. It's appertinent to what we're talking about here. Quote, It could be that our smartphone distractions and Kardashian celebrity culture have slowly but steadily lowered our critical standards, the aesthetic version of inflation. The critics might like certain films and books today because they're surrounded by such a vast wasteland of mediocrity, but if you had released them 15 years ago, they would have paled besides the masterpieces of that era. And I think there's something to this. I think the reason there's so many remakes, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily against remakes. If you're bringing something new to the table, or if it's a movie perhaps that really needed, a lot more expounded upon, do it. Please go for it. I am 100% on board. Okay. Or if you're going to do it in a respectful way, like the Kelvin timeline Star Trek movies have, to where you still admit that the prime timeline exists, awesome. Go for it. Okay. I think that's great. But I really think we are in an era of mediocre films. Not all of them. There's some that are still great. Ninja Turtles was pretty good. I've talked about some good films that I've seen here and there. There's been some others, but largely they've been genre films, or science fiction films, the Europa Report and stuff like this. But yeah, something's not right because a lot of the stuff coming out is just shit. And while TV might be experiencing some kind of a golden age, but that's because of the amount of time they get to spend on telling stories, I think there's a lost art in film going on right now. I think we are in a dearth of great movies. I really do. And I don't know if we're ever going to recapture it. The only way we're going to recapture it is if we recapture maybe the way that, like the backgrounds, the histories, the lives that a lot of the great directors of the past lived, to where things were, I keep using the word, but things were very visceral. Things were very real. When everything can just show up on a smartphone screen, in some ways it's great that it can make your creativity come to life. But I think there is a reverse action, or there's a negative action that occurs also to where it kills creativity. Because you don't have to be creative in bringing your creativity to life. And so you don't get that double dose of creativity. Does that make sense? I think we've lost something. So anyway, that's Limitless. I bring that up. It's kind of science fiction with NZT and all that. So I didn't really want to include it in the list. But that is like the only modern film that I'd put in, or film from the past 15 years that would have made a movie that isn't, that isn't science fiction. There's been some great science fiction, no question there. But also a lot of that's been based off of books that already existed. Limitless was as well, I guess. So, but the movie is kind of different from Dark Fields. So anyway, there you have it. I think I'm done. I've probably been talking far longer. Yep, an hour and a half. Go figure. I can't do an hour. I can't do a half hour. I just keep running my mouth. So I hope you enjoyed the top 8. You are welcome to, on this sound, if you want to share your top 8, you are welcome to do so right on Patreon. And you guys, have a conversation about it, or tell me if you disagree, or if there's something that you think should have been on this list. Definitely let me know that. If there's a great movie I missed that you think is just phenomenal, you let me know, because I am dying to see a great movie. Maybe the Jungle Book. I haven't seen the newest Jungle Book yet. Maybe that should have made this list. Maybe that's one of them. But anyway, I haven't, but that's kind of fantastical, talking animals and all that. So, but let me know, what you think maybe your top 8 should have been. And maybe I'll briefly cover it on a Q&A or in another Patreon episode. So anyway, Carpe Lucem, everybody. Of course, a Sex and Science Hour will be out tomorrow because this is getting released on a Thursday, actually Thursday, August 25th, 2016. So you have a Sex and Science Hour tomorrow, and then you'll have a brand new Sovryn Tech come Saturday. And I've got a doozy of an episode. We've got some amazing developments to talk about, and I mean fucking amazing. And I'll let the cat out of the bag right now. It has to do with mushrooms. Ooh, it's not what you think, because the Golden Stallion doesn't rock like that, but that's okay if you do. Anyway, Carpe Lucem. Woo! I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com That's Sovryn tech.com and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.